There was a silence that lasted years. And most people never noticed it. When Ellen's toxic workplace scandal broke in 2020, the common reaction was shock. This came out of nowhere. This was sudden. It wasn't. If you go back, and I mean really go back, old interviews, archived carpet footage, backstage clips, decade-old guest appearances, a pattern emerges. One that had been building quietly for a very long time. Celebrities who used to appear on Ellen's show regularly stopped coming. No announcements. No falling outs. No public drama. Just fewer appearances. Then one. Then a promotional visit that felt obligatory. Then nothing. And this wasn't one celebrity. Or two. This was a pattern. Think about Mariah Carey. 2008. She came on Ellen's show, and Ellen, live on camera in front of millions, asked her about a pregnancy Mariah had never publicly confirmed. Watch the clip carefully. The smile stays. But something behind her eyes goes somewhere else entirely. Reports later suggested Mariah felt ambushed in that moment. Trapped on live television with nowhere to go. And yet, that clip circulated, people watched it, and the conversation never really happened. Because Ellen was the nicest person in Hollywood. How do you criticize that? That was Ellen's most powerful weapon.
I appreciate it so much.
Not her
I really
platform.
do.
Not her ratings.
You look good. You look like
not
you
her
got
network,
a good night's sleep. Everybody.
her image. The Be Kind brand wasn't just a catchphrase.
It's all about
It functioned as a shield, one that made criticism almost structurally impossible. Every uncomfortable moment got absorbed, edited out, buried under audience laughter, dismissed with, "Oh, that's just Ellen being Ellen." The brand did the defending so Ellen never had to. Then there's the Dakota Johnson interview. 2019. You've probably seen it. Ellen claimed she hadn't been invited to Dakota's birthday party. Dakota, without hesitation, looking directly at the camera, said, "Actually, you were invited." The room went quiet for exactly 1 second. Ellen's expression shifted. Something flickered across her face. And then the show moved on like the moment had never existed. But the internet didn't let it go. That clip circulated for weeks. People analyzed it frame by frame. Ellen's micro-expression, the rapid subject change, Dakota's composed but completely firm delivery. Comment sections filled with one observation, repeated over and over. This is the first time I've ever seen someone actually hold their ground with her. But here's the question that doesn't get asked enough. Why didn't that moment land harder in 2019? Because the show's format was engineered to prevent it. Fast pacing. Constant music. Audience energy kept deliberately high. Any uncomfortable beat got naturally swallowed by whatever came next. You felt the moment, but by the time you'd processed it, you were already 3 segments ahead. That wasn't an accident. That was architecture. So what did celebrities do? The ones who couldn't publicly distance themselves without consequence? They quietly canceled bookings. They cited scheduling conflicts. They started preferring other shows. And if anyone asked, the answer was always the same: busy. Projects. Timing. Hollywood is a small world. Speaking out against a host whose show functioned as a career accelerator. That was an expensive move. So people didn't speak. They just drifted. And their silence was its own kind of answer. There's an unspoken rule in this industry. You don't publicly embarrass powerful people, no matter what they do to you. And by the 2010s, Ellen DeGeneres was genuinely powerful. Her show was career currency. An appearance meant exposure. It meant relatability. It meant I connect with real people. So when a celebrity felt uncomfortable in that space, their options were limited. Smile through it, or quietly disappear. Most did both. First they smiled. Then they disappeared. And the disappearing was always gradual. Deliberately gradual. An A-lister who used to appear 3 times a year becomes twice. Then once. Then a single promotional visit that felt contractually obligated. Then nothing. No fight. No statement. Just absence. Absence has its own psychology. When 2 powerful names stop appearing together consistently, Hollywood insiders notice. PR teams notice. Agents notice. But audiences don't, because audiences don't track what used to be there. They only see what's in front of them. And before 2020, if you'd asked the average viewer whether Ellen's show was problematic, most would have pushed back immediately. She does so much charity. She came out publicly in 1997. She paid a real price for that. Her energy is so positive. All of that was true. And all of it was, simultaneously, a remarkably effective distraction. Because public image and private behavior are 2 different things. And the gap between Ellen's two versions may be one of the most carefully managed gaps in modern Hollywood history. On screen, dancing, gifts, surprise reunions, emotional moments that felt genuinely moving. And some of them were genuine, because television blurs the line between performed and real so completely that even the people performing sometimes can't tell the difference. But backstage? When BuzzFeed published their investigation in July 2020, current and former staff members, speaking anonymously, the most disturbing detail wasn't that something bad had happened. It was how many people already knew. Staff described a hostile work environment that had existed for years. Allegations of racial microaggressions. A culture where employees felt they couldn't share personal problems. On the set of a show where kindness was literally a brand value. When that story broke, one specific reaction dominated social media. "I'm not surprised." And that phrase, said casually, said repeatedly, wasn't just a reaction. It was a collective memory finally surfacing. People started pulling up old clips, old interviews. Moments that had previously read as just Ellen being Ellen were suddenly being read entirely differently. There was a clip, Ellen, in conversation with Oprah, almost offhandedly mentioning feeling uncomfortable around celebrities who tried to get too close. Originally, it seemed innocuous. By 2020, people were watching it as something else entirely. When perception shifts, the past shifts with it. And that shift wasn't only happening in audiences. Behind the scenes, booking patterns were already changing. Requests to appear on the show were being delayed, politely declined. One senior PR professional, speaking off the record to an industry publication, mentioned that several of their clients had quietly decided, well before 2020, that the Ellen Show was low priority. Low priority. Not blacklisted. Not refused. Low priority. Because in Hollywood, you don't burn bridges unless you absolutely have to. You don't make enemies publicly. You just stop crossing. And if anyone asks, you say scheduling. Scheduling. That one word covers more in this industry than most people realize. But there's something in this story that consistently gets overlooked. This wasn't only about how staff was treated. The dynamics with celebrities, that's a separate chapter. And to understand that chapter, you have to understand how Ellen's show actually functioned, structurally, psychologically, as a system of power. Appearing on Ellen was a controlled experience. Now, controlled doesn't automatically mean sinister. Every major talk show is controlled. Questions are pre-discussed, segments are planned, tone is set in advance. That's standard. But guests on Ellen's show described something more specific. They often didn't know exactly what Ellen was going to do. That unpredictability was deliberate. Go back to the Mariah moment. Or think about the segments where Ellen would subject guests to their phobias, spiders, heights, sudden scares, even after a guest had clearly signaled discomfort. There's footage where a guest's body language shifts multiple times, and the segment continues anyway. Audience laughing. Ellen energetic. A person's genuine anxiety becoming the entertainment. From the outside, it looked like fun. What it felt like from the inside, that conversation wasn't happening. And that's the most psychologically complex part of how this whole system worked. The show was wrapped in so much warmth. The music, the dancing, the charity, the emotional reunions. That if a guest was uncomfortable, their first instinct was often to doubt themselves. Ellen is so positive. She does so much good. Maybe I'm overreacting. That thought process, second-guessing your own discomfort in the presence of someone powerful, is extraordinarily common. And the Ellen brand had, almost by design, made it the default response. That's how institutional gaslighting works. Not loudly, not obviously, quietly, invisibly, built into the structure itself. After 2020, when multiple celebrities spoke, always off the record, always anonymously, to industry insiders, a consistent thread emerged. A feeling of not being able to say no. A sense that declining the show would ripple outward in ways that were hard to predict. Ellen's network was wide: producers, distributors, studio executives. And in Hollywood, relationships are currency. So saying no felt costly, even if no direct threat had ever been made. That's the most sophisticated form of power. When you don't have to say anything. When your presence alone, your network, your reputation, your reach, is enough that the other person regulates their own behavior. When people aren't afraid of you, exactly. They just don't feel comfortable opposing you. And the Be Kind brand reinforced all of it. Because if Ellen was the public ambassador of kindness, then challenging her publicly meant positioning yourself as unkind. Critics had to preface everything. I'm not saying she's a bad person. I'm just observing. That defensive crouch, that constant qualification? The brand manufactured it. Some former industry insiders described a recurring pattern, names and details shifting, but the shape of it always the same. A celebrity appears on the show. Something happens, a question, a segment, that genuinely unsettles them. Afterward, when they talk to their team, the response is, "You're overreacting." The show went great. The audience loved it. And the audience had loved it. That's the tension that's hardest to resolve. Ellen's show made millions of people genuinely happy. Real families received real help. Real emotional moments happened on that stage. None of that can be dismissed, and honestly, none of it should be. But a system that looks warm and generous from the outside can feel entirely different from within. And both things can be true simultaneously. That's an uncomfortable idea. It doesn't give you a clean story. But that's what reality actually looks like. The celebrities who quietly drifted away, that wasn't a coordinated movement. There was no group chat, no collective decision. These were individual choices, made from individual experiences, that never surfaced publicly because the cost of surfacing them was simply too high. Then 2020 came. And what people forget, the BuzzFeed investigation was built on staff testimony. Not celebrities. Celebrities still didn't speak publicly. Some issued vague statements of solidarity. Some said nothing at all. Some actually defended her. But there was one group that was the most revealing of all. The ones who, when media reached out directly for comment, simply didn't respond. No defense. No condemnation. Silence. And in Hollywood, silence is the loudest statement available. Because everything in this industry is on record. Every statement is archived. Every interview is clipped and cataloged. So when someone deliberately chooses silence, when someone consciously selects no comment, that is a decision. Intentional, calculated, and telling. Ellen's show ended in 2022. The official reason, she wanted a new chapter. Ratings had been declining. The energy had shifted. And the final episode was emotional, genuinely reflective. Ellen speaking about her journey, her struggles, the road that had brought her here. The audience gave her a standing ovation. That moment was real. Earned even. But did you notice the guest list? Look at it carefully. Some names were there, familiar faces, longtime supporters. But others, people who had been show regulars, people whose public relationship with Ellen had always seemed warm, weren't there. Scheduling conflicts, no doubt. This isn't a story about a villain. And it isn't a story about a victim. It's a story about a system, one that exists in Hollywood and honestly far beyond it, where power gets packaged so carefully, so warmly, so kindly, that questioning it feels almost impossible until the system itself begins to collapse. Ellen DeGeneres did things that genuinely matter. Coming out publicly in 1997, that took real courage, carried a real cost, and changed television permanently. Her charitable work was real. These things don't disappear. But the celebrities who distanced themselves, they were feeling something. Something specific. Something real enough that the career risk felt worth it. Think about that. If Be Kind was purely a brand, consider how effective that brand was. Effective enough that for years, no one could say it out loud. Effective enough that people who felt uncomfortable started questioning themselves instead of the situation. Effective enough that an entire significant portion of an industry quietly rerouted their schedules and nobody noticed. Or maybe someone noticed and stayed quiet anyway. This isn't just Ellen's story. This is a template, a blueprint for a specific kind of power dynamic that repeats itself in Hollywood and well beyond it. Warm public image, controlled environment, deliberate unpredictability, and a brand engineered to turn any criticism into evidence of the critic's own cruelty. Next time you notice a celebrity quietly drifting from a powerful figure, remember this. That distance doesn't appear suddenly. It builds. Slowly. Individually. Without coordination, without announcement. By the time the public sees it, the story is already years old. The final episode aired. The credits rolled. The lights went down. And the celebrities who had already been gone for years, maybe they watched it. Maybe they didn't. Either way, they didn't say a word. And somehow that says everything. If this kind of storytelling interests you, the psychology beneath the surface, the real texture of power, the things mainstream coverage quietly skips over, subscribe. This channel doesn't cover what everyone else is covering. It covers what takes time to notice. And even longer to say. The next one is already in the works. And it goes deeper than this.